I'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mary Kay, roll call.
Dr. Dave Pardo,
Here.
Jill Maddick Nelson,
Here.
Dr. Noel Deep, Katie Anna Strenga,
Present.
Julie Sprague,
Yes.
and Andy Mary is joining us.
And we received a text from Danny that something came up with his, I'm assuming, pastoral,
Okay.
so he will not be here. It was late, so something just happened. Okay, I'm assuming, unless our person in the corner, oh, he says no to the public comments, so, okay. So we'll go to new business, Katie Ann, I'm just going to let you go through all this stuff, and we'll start out with the CISA 9 service agreement.
Wonderful. So the CISA 9 service agreement is a yearly agreement that we work the partnership for some shared services through CISA 9. So 23-24 is in front of you of what we expect to potentially need for the upcoming school year. Are there any specific questions?
Danny sent me a text. Sorry.
Well, Dave looks for that. Are there changes, additions, decreases?
Yeah, that's what it's about, I think.
So, and Julie may be able to speak a little bit. We did not, the only increase is the early learning program support services.
Some amounts are slightly different. We met with CISA 9, which is the first time they've done that. Usually we fill this out on our own, and then as the year progresses, like if we need to purchase, let's say, 3 additional days of help from Amy McGovern, we'll do that.
Right.
But we met with them directly and had some questions for them, and we also took a look at our needs, our school improvement plan, and adjusted it as such. And I don't want to get out in front of you, but the other attachment we added, it actually was at Angie's suggestion. She was unclear, or stated at one time she was unclear about the services they provide. So they actually attached a summary of our work this year and where we're headed next year. So I thought that hopefully would be helpful to the board so that you can see what types of services they provide.
Is that this one?
Otherwise, there's
Yes.
less than a $600 change from last year to this year.
For the total
For
expenses?
total expenses.
$600?
Less than.
Okay, because Danny thought that it was a $65,500 increase. So I don't know where he saw it, but I probably shouldn't have said that into the camera. But that was his concern. I'm not sure where he was getting these numbers. So we're down $600. Is that what I'm hearing?
We are down 600 from where we are currently slated for this year compared to next year, correct?
Okay.
Yep.
Is a lot of this still being run through Fund 10, or is some of it going through ESSER?
None of this goes through ESSER.
Okay.
This all goes through Fund 27,
Oh, yeah.
Fund 10, and then there is some covered by other grants. I believe some of the, let me just grab it.
27?
Fund 27 is special ed,
Yep, okay.
which is what CSIS originally provided to
And the
districts.
mental health stuff, I believe some of it goes through the mental health grants through the state.
Okay. I should have thought 10 and 27, but I didn't. But
Is
it's
there
always 27.
any significant changes? I know the price went down 600, but in the services that we're requesting?
No, we're hoping, CISA 9 is currently trying to hire an occupational therapist that isn't a full OT. They do
Yes,
be
they're,
like a assistant OT. And so instead of then 1 day a week, we would be able to up it for the same price to like 3 or 4 days a week for services. So we're hoping, but they haven't filled that position at the moment.
so in other words, if we have a full-time OT, which we do in Katie Parlick. Can't think of her.
Williams Park.
Williams Parlick, thank you. But then if we need more than that, it's really unlikely to find somebody willing to take a half-time or less position. So then Heidi contracts with CISA to fill just the needs. So that would fluctuate depending upon IEP needs each year.
Okay, so Katie's stays the same.
Correct.
This would be because
addition.
Katie is only one person and the
Correct.
need is, okay.
Same with speech and language
Okay.
and anything in the special education realm. Heidi will supplement with these services.
But I would guess then OT on this is just based off of our baseline data for this year, of what we'd like,
Right, or for what is written in IEPs for next year.
or, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. Okay.
Okay, anything else? Link?
I found, Katie, can you tell me what this year's is again? I have to
So
get this
this
larger
year
numbers.
is 220 to 275. And I also found last year's and I.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yep. And I think I know where the differences that Danny's talking about came in. We did not have an occupational therapist built in. And so I wonder if we had one hired internal that we had to switch then to shared. Because last year we did not have one built in, or this year we didn't have one built into the contract,
Okay,
but we used one.
that's possible.
We also had more speech and language pathology that we needed, that we contracted, as well as visual impairment. That was an increase as well from what we expected.
If you'd like, before you approve at the end of the month, we could have an itemized differential for you.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we
That'll
would have
do.
had that ready this time, I apologize.
Nah, it's okay.
I didn't really think
It's-
about that either until just now.
It's like, still got 3 weeks.
Oh, and the behavior and mental health intervention support was added with ESSER. So you are correct, that was an ESSER add. But otherwise, those were the 3 changes that we saw from what we signed to what it ended up being at the tail end.
Okay. All right, we will move on to Antigo Child Care Center Agreement.
Well, come on up again.
Gee,
I would like to just sit right
oh darn, I was pulling up my hat.
I can sit right. Dave, come back to the full board then.
Yes, yes.
Good to see you.
I like how you put her nice and convenient.
Zoom in, Jamie.
Oh, yeah.
Remember,
Great, it's been a long day.
I'll frame you too, so you look important.
You should have just never told me.
All right, so next on the agenda is item B, Antigo Child Care Center Agreement. So I want to initially draw your attention to the sheet that has the blue lines. I, a couple months ago, sent some questions off to Gabby to answer for us so that way we could make an educated decision on what route we'd like to go with this tonight. And so I'd like to just go over some of the data points that I asked from Gabby. And actually, Gabby, would you like to go over them? Because I know some
Sure.
have changed already.
Yeah,
and-
sure.
Or are
Mhm.
going to be, so.
Okay, so this was probably 2 months ago.
January
Yeah,
timeframe,
okay.
I want to say.
Sounds good. So at that current time, we have 7 district employees, children within the partnership. We have one child who is enrolled but not starting until spring, meaning like end of April, early May. And then we have 3 children on the waiting list that are either not born yet or will need to wait until summer, fall, as we are at our maximum capacity. But then, due to the partnership plan, they received priority. We currently have 32 children on our waiting list right now. One just enrolled, actually, one more just enrolled, and then they bump in front of everybody else on the waiting list, which is definitely a benefit. Otherwise, right now, I'm estimating at this point if someone would enroll fall of 2024. That unless we see a family disenroll or the next wave of kids go to 4K, there isn't room, to continue increasing capacity. The school district employees receive 10% off their weekly billing with the partnership. So at that time, those children had received $2,351.40 in discounts. But I did want to note that although that was July through December, 3 of the 7 children didn't start until school started. So that number doesn't necessarily reflect all 7 of them. And then 2 of the 7 children didn't start until the end of August. So to have all 7 children counted isn't necessarily in that total. And then each school district employee also receives 10 additional vacation days. So depending on the age of the child and what room they're in, that's anywhere between $30 and $35 a day. So that is $2,300 just in additional vacation day credit that the district employees have received. I do hear, feedback that's wonderful to have. We just went through spring break, we had winter break. Otherwise, families would be paying full price for those breaks to sustain the center. Do you have any questions on those before I move on?
Gabby, did you say that if a district parent wants to enroll a child now, they won't get in until 2024?
That is what I estimate our current waiting list to be. Part of our partnership agreement is that they would increase in front of every other person on the waiting list. So I had a family.
But even though they go to the top of the list,
I save room. There are spots. I do save room because what happens then is if I completely fill the classrooms, there's no growth throughout the year. So if our preschool classroom holds 16 children, if I start the school year out with 16 children in there, then there's no movement throughout the whole year.
So Gabby, what I think I was hearing,
Yeah.
so you can tell me, all the kids that are currently in your program, if they move out due to age,
Yep.
that's where bringing these other people in puts the ones at the bottom into 24.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I do save, so I say we're at our maximum capacity. We have 2 spots available because of the ages right now. So the only spots that I have available at the center at this time is if they're between a year and a half to 2 years old. So since none of the people on the waiting list fill that age range, then those spots are open. So then as children, we call them graduate. So we actually have 6 kids graduated into 4K this next year. And we are expanding our infant room in a few weeks. So the Housing Authority decided to tackle that project for us. My office will become another baby room. I don't spend much time in there anyways. So we're removing 2 walls, combining 2 rooms together, so that'll also increase our capacity by 4 infants. And then since the toddler room will actually become 2 to 3-year-olds instead of a mixture, then I can have 12 in there instead of 8. So really, we're increasing our capacity by 8 kids after the construction project.
So your
Total.
capacity next year will be 40, potentially,
43.
43.
Yes. So we know there's a need for more childcare. I'm not ready to take on another center at this point, but that's a way that we can expand to increase the children we can serve at the center.
So when you talked about this whole thing last year, you did talk about taking on another building. Is that still in the future?
Yes, so we applied as a county through the Economic Development Corporation for the Dream Up grant. That is a $75,000 grant to dedicate solely to childcare. So we will find out in May if we were an award recipient of that for Langlade County. And then I'm sitting on the board with Angie Close, NTC, and our child caring resources and representatives of how then we're gonna spend, and we have community members, so Katie
on that board.
was invited to be on that board of how we're gonna spend that $75,000 to enhance childcare in Langlade County.
Doesn't all necessarily go to you.
No. So, off topic, but one of our biggest goals is to increase the rural care family providers, because all the regulated child care providers in Langlade County are in Antigo. So you have all of your outer lying kind of smaller communities that travel for childcare. I have families that are in like the Elko Pickerel area that come all the way to the center for childcare.
You are offering a summer
Yes.
school age programming, which I would say is in some ways an extension or an expansion. And
Yes,
it's-
so All Saints reached
Seasonal.
out, sorry to interrupt you.
Yep, no, go ahead.
That they were looking for some sort of summer programming and asked if it'd be something that I would be interested in doing. So that's potentially in the works too.
And what are the age ranges for that again?
That one would then be 5 to 10.
And would you do that in your building or somewhere else?
All Saints volunteered their building for us to use it since it was kind of their idea.
But you would staff it?
Yes. And then kind of the next agenda is to figure out, you have the Robin's Nest, correct? And that goes until 4:30 p.m., correct?
4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, 3 to 4.
So then the next goal would be, the next request that I've had, besides expanding, is providing that before and after school care in the elementary schools. Being able to staff like a 6:30 a.m. until 8 o'clock a.m. person and then a 3 to 6 p.m. person,
At your center in the school?
potentially in the schools. So that's kind
Wouldn't
of
it
the
be
next
nice if we had
agenda.
one school to do that in?
Also, if we had more college kids
Shame
that
to
want to
say.
work those hours, between. That's what I did growing up
I
in
didn't know
college
this
too,
was
is
a
you could work
building and
before, you
grounds
go to
committee
college all
meeting.
day and then go work after, so.
But you didn't do that here in Anacostia?
No, I went to Eau Claire, but, yeah, those are kind of all on my radar right
Okay.
now.
Can you hire high school kids to do that?
They just created, so as of March 1st, 2023, we had our rules and regulations changes through the state, and they now created a program aid. So they have to be 16 years old at least. They need to have completed at least one of Tracy Frisch's courses, and then go through the background check, fingerprinting process, and they can now. Before they had to be 18.
So they would be an aide, so if they were at a elementary school, for example, they couldn't be the only person?
Right. So they could help, but they can't be the only person.
Would they count for ratios?
So that's the trickiest part, is they're there to help. The good difference with school age program is that your ratios are much, much
Bigger.
larger. Yeah. But they can be there to assist. So again, tricky part, you're paying someone to assist, but they can't be counted in your adult to child ratios. So
That is tricky.
that is tricky. I do have a student who graduated this winter that's going to the Tech for Childcare that wants like practicum hours and field experience. And since she has a GED or high school diploma, she can.
Even though she's not 18?
Yes. So there's different, rules and speculations and how many classes and courses and all the things that I'm learning. Yeah. Yeah, so then she's gonna apply to be the person to do all my staff's breaks. So it'd be like an 11 to 2 o'clock job. Yeah. So, yeah. Let's see. The third question was a brief summary about how it has impacted perhaps both of us. I'm going to kind of skip down to the second paragraph first. So if we add up the 7 and the 7 that are currently there, the 1 that is enrolled but not starting quite yet, and the 3, that brings us to 11. And 7 out of those 11 weren't originally enrolled in June when we sent out our first enrollment. So 7 out of those 11 kids benefited on that priority status of our partnership. Being able to, surpass 15 some other children on the waiting list to receive the next available spot in their classroom. And they're not all infants either. So I have a couple of school district employees that had put on there, and they knew, so here's an example, they couldn't get in until summer or until fall. But at least it's not 2024. Yeah.
Or call back and check in 3 or 6 months and then repeat.
Yeah.
So probably there's some fluctuation, but more definitive, approximate time frame.
Yes. Or I kind of could estimate out, like I said, we have X amount of kids graduating onto 4K. Then I've pretty much all those spots were filled with school district employees. Yeah. And 1 would have been on the bottom of the list because they would have been the last one to just register.
But they actually got it.
Mm-hmm. Well, they will, yes, come summer, fall. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it also definitely allowed me to be able to pay my staff as high of wages as I possibly can. So I say that too, that's one of my highest priorities is that, and I always tell them this too, it's not babysitting. They lesson plan, they set goals for each child, they're responsible for their social emotional skills and things like that. So I definitely pay them as high as I possibly can based on their training, education, experience, things like that. We've definitely funded, we are funding one of my staff to go back to NTC. She received a Teach Scholarship through the state. They're covering 90% of her tuition. Then I'm paying for the other 5%, and she's responsible for covering the other 5%. So being able to provide scholarships like that for staff.
What certification or licensure?
So then she'll receive her associates in early
Okay.
childhood.
I see. Nice. Have you had much staff turnover this year?
Not the core staff. So I talked, we have that breaking person, like an 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock person. That usually lasts for some for a while, and then if they're looking for more hours or things like that, and I don't have the opportunity to give them. 2 out of our 7 lead staff have turned over. 1 for personal reasons, she moved out of the area. Yes.
Okay.
And the only other thing I was kind of going to add is that with this Dream Up grant and the state budget changing, and right now we are still receiving COVID dollars through the state per child and per teacher, but that's estimated to end, whether it's August or in January. And that's kind of the biggest thing all child care providers are fighting for right now is if that decreases or discontinues, how are you able to sustain a center on parent funding alone? And that's where I have been contacted many times about our partnership plan. Actually recently from a child advocacy place in La Crosse, Madison. We're receiving a Wisconsin Rural Development Award for being innovative with our partnership plan. So we're very well known throughout the state of Wisconsin, thanks to the school district and VOLM, and it definitely wouldn't be sustainable without our partnership at this point, especially if those dollars would go away.
Early on, school districts contacted me too.
Mhm.
Now, it's been a while,
Oh, okay.
but interested
Yeah.
in how we make that work.
I will say I serve on another board and have had conversations, and I think for the most part, I've always brought it back to you to share the positive feedback, but it's very impressive, the model that you've presented to the district and the district currently has that partnership with is highly impressive, and across the state is well-known of Anago childcare. Because the need is high everywhere, statewide, nationwide, probably. And there's a teacher shortage. So it's just a really creative, innovative way to meet needs, and it's highly recognized. So we're proud of that. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I've heard great things too about our partnership, and staff appreciate it too. It brings, costs down for them a little bit. Especially infants or multi-child families receive, a pretty significant discount on a weekly or monthly basis. Yeah, and just, I think the biggest thing to recognize is how it's benefiting our entire community. And just that, sustaining a child care center on those parent fees alone, they would have to go up significantly, which makes it, then unaffordable for families to work.
Correct.
So Gabby, do you check the fees in like Wausau? I was talking to somebody in the Stevens Point area. They gave me a much higher number for childcare.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, if you go to the Department of Public Instruction or a child care resource and referral agency like Child Caring, ours is out of Mosinee, yes, the rates are significantly higher. And I think that just also is based on the cost of living, the cost of salary, or what people are, making and things like that, wages. Our infant room is $200 a week right now, and in Wausau, I bet it's $285.
Okay, yeah, somebody told me $350.
Yeah.
Point.
Depends. A point would probably be more. You get further, down south towards Madison, Milwaukee, they're going to increase even further. So I try to stay competitive with the other child cares in the area.
Is VOM a tier 2 partner?
They are currently our tier 3 partner. We did not succeed in filling a tier 2 partner.
So you just have 2 partners? And so parents with children at VOM, do they get in?
We have not had, besides a sibling, so we have a toddler who just recently had a sibling that used that benefit. But otherwise, they have not had a lot of enrollment.
They haven't had, I forget what tier 3 entitles them to.
They could have up to 6 spots. They currently hold 3.
3, and so if they had 3 more people, would they go ahead of our 10th,
Nope.
our 11th and 12th person?
Nope.
No, okay.
And that's kind of what Angie and I were talking about is, I think on the new proposed plan,
Angie Close.
yes, sorry, to clarify.
Just to clarify.
Yes, maybe it's not listed on here, but part of our partnership contract or signed agreement is that being a tier 1 partner, especially that they would all receive the discount as well. That 11th person or 12th person would be left out of that discount. And I was mentioning too, as I wrote on here, Angie and I were working on reevaluating the partnership plan. And right now it's working so smoothly. She said, I think it's important, going into your second year that to leave it. It's running smoothly. Let's just run with it for now. So the reason the tiers were also, I get what you're saying, the reason the tiers were also created was so that we know the school district employees receive that priority benefit over a VOM employee. But I do get the verbiage you're saying that would be important to include in there. That if there are 11 and 12 people, would they bump in front of them as well?
You get part of where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
The other part would be, what if the school district switches to a tier 2? Would as many kids as the school district have be at the top of the list?
I don't have an answer for you on that right now, but definitely something I need to think about. You're right. Yeah.
Are
that's a
you
really good
able
question.
to tell us if you have companies or organizations interested in partnering additionally than you have right now?
Sure. So I did not, once we filled the center and we opened in July, and what I've kind of explained to other businesses who have reached out is this would only be able, you'd only be able to do something like this when you're opening new or a new center.
Okay.
To be able to, parents were worried too, are you going to release us or, kick us out of care because you have school district employees or VOLM employees coming in? And that was part of the plan, that was not going to happen. But to try to be able to implement something like this in a center that's already even half full would be very difficult to do.
Why couldn't you add a tier 2 company? What would be hard about that?
I would have to release family. I mean, unless they were willing to wait.
Yeah, they would be on the waiting list behind school district, but they'd be ahead of
VOLM.
any new people.
So the feedback that I received when I was reaching out to other businesses, I mean, Satori Cheese, Carl's Transport, Covantage, when we went through that, Waukesha Bearing, was that they have multiple branches and locations, and it wasn't seen in their company to offer childcare to their employees in Antigo or Langley County and not other places. So then the tier 2 tier 2 partner had 8 spots. There wasn't enough need at one business to have 8 childcare needs.
Okay.
So when Angie and I kind of re-looked over it, that was kind of the question of, do we adjust the spots? Do we want to go for other tier 2 partners and things like that? And there wasn't any other interest at that time.
Could you have 2 tier 3 partners?
No. And the reason for that is then how would you decide who has priority over the other?
Coin.
We want her to stay in business, Andy, right? Yeah.
There is the partnership, so the Dream Up grant is like a starting up grant to bring awareness to childcare. And then the Partner Up grant is for businesses to partner with licensed childcare facilities to offer the benefit of, it's almost like then a grant to the business. So like VOLM gives their staff X amount of dollars per month for childcare, besides stipending me. So I have to fill out a sheet every month for a VOLM employee's child of what was their cost for the month. And then I don't know if they use a percentage or if it's a flat amount per child, then VOLM employees get refunded that money. So the Partner Up grant is similar to that, which the school district could apply for as well. That you could, but then that's where we hit that wall challenge of then is that, how do you do that for other providers? So they'd have to be at a licensed facility. So us, Leroy, or a licensed family provider to receive that grant money for the family. So I receive money back, the family receives money through their business partner. Or say I worked at Kretz Lumber. If Kretz applied for the Partner Up grant and they received it, then they pay their employees X amount of money that they're receiving from the state. And then the center also receives X amount of funding per child because of that program. So when we first opened and the Partner Up grant was available, we weren't licensed yet. They are reopening that again, I heard, in the near future.
So why would it be a problem for the school district? Because
I think
we would pay our employees that, and then if we had some at Leroy, we would pay them.
I think the hardest part was then are you, how do I want to say this?
Are you favoritizing the ones that can get into licensed care facility when we have many who are not? have kids in licensed care facilities because there are not enough
Thank
in
you,
the
yes.
area.
So in-home.
In-home care, in-home
But
unlicensed care.
we don't,
Yeah.
school districts employees
Mhm.
are pretty likely to be able to get into a licensed.
I would bet you not.
We have many.
That's a very bold statement
That is
that
a
I,
very bold statement.
But,
Or would what not want to change.
well, they might not want to change.
We had some of those too when we partnered.
Katie Ann,
Yes.
on this sheet.
Yes.
It says at the very top, 20% of yearly expenses, $5,000 a month. So is that the projected payment for the upcoming year, or is that what we paid last year?
We paid that this year,
Okay.
and that is the same next year is a 60,000 as well, if we stay at tier 1.
Okay,
Also caveat, this
Okay.
is funded through ESSER.
yeah,
So that brings up.
Next year.
After next year.
yeah,
We'd have to discuss further.
okay.
can we use the community fund, the numbers?
Well, that would
That's
be
later
for
on.
23, 24.
Correct, yes.
So, I see no reason to change if you're willing to go with exactly what it was, same language, everything in the agreement, except the dates, and it's a good thing for our teachers and other employees who can use this benefit, and I see no reason why we don't put it on April's agenda and, in my estimation, approve it again.
Yeah. Things are, I'm pleasantly surprised with how great things are going. Knock on wood, right? Yeah, and I just, can't say enough again how I feel as though this wouldn't be as sustainable if it weren't for the partnership plans.
Well, we remain proud of you, like you said, bringing such an opportunity to our community and our families. I mean, that was a risk, but a calculated risk, and you saw the benefit.
Obviously
We just
needed
applaud
them. You wouldn't be full if it wasn't needed.
Yes.
And-
I wish there was more that we could do. I'm just so blessed and grateful to have the staff that I do. I don't want to, fill spots with body,
Right.
yes, with just,
People.
yes,
You want to.
fill them with
Part of-
quality, yeah.
Part of your mission is that you have high-quality providers,
Mhm.
and that's important.
Yes.
Katie, and one more question for you.
Yeah.
After the ESSER money is gone, is this something that could be funded through Fund 80?
No,
That was my question,
I
too.
don't believe so, because it is not it's not something that
Is accessible to everyone?
is not accessible to full community to just use or be a part of. That is off the cuff. I will do some digging, but that is the case with like the aquatic center, is that it can serve all of the community at many times, but being that only
That there's limited spots?
limited spots and that it's a wait list, it's not like a full
So
service.
if she opened a
community.
second facility and there are water spots available all the time, then it could be funded?
I'd have to look. I'll do some digging.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean like a YMCA?
Wavelength.
Again, we're kind of at a building and grounds for the second time.
The other topic that's got brought up was to do a center, just a school district facility center. For future conversation. Yeah.
I know Elko has one.
Bowler just did one too.
This is really good because, 6 years ago, we tried to do a school center and it didn't fly at all. So,
I'd be willing, I say this lightly, I'd be willing to, staff it and run it. If, the benefit to that would be that if they were employed by the school district, which I believe is what Elko does, and Bowler now, then they receive the benefits of insurance, things like that.
Yeah, and that liability expense comes to us, and you're able to just do the operation direction?
Mhm.
Gotcha.
The
Okay.
staffing and the
Yeah.
administrative pieces of licensing, all of those.
The fun part.
Yes, now I have to learn new ones.
Well, thank you, Gabby.
Yes, thank you. I'm
Yes.
sorry if I took so much of your time.
No problem, but it was
Appreciate
needed.
you being
Yes,
here.
absolutely.
And Gabby is the former superintendent
Sorry.
of Wittenberg-Burnhamwood. We're glad you left.
Garrett's already said that to me too, like, if we're ready to start one, are you gonna help us out?
You
So-
tell me.
Yeah, Garrett,
All
Garrett,
sorts of Wittenberg Brewing.
Garrett was my replacement.
Yeah, I did love it there though, but it was time, it was a nice change. Yes, that's for sure. So, and my little one's in the hallway too. She's good. We had gymnastics tonight, and Jordan ended up having his council meeting, so he has one and I have the others. She saw your truck.
I
She
thought
knew
we
you were
missed
here.
gymnastics. It's Monday night, okay.
Oh, yeah, we're Monday.
Dividing time.
I was just gonna say that, thank you so much.
Yeah, so good to see you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, we will move on to wage increase recommendation 2324, which is item C.
Perfect. We will start with the colorful sheet. That is our certified staff plan. The second plan on there, if you take a look, the proposed one is at the top, 2324. The current is one step down, 2223. And then if you look at the third step, it shows the change by step and by lane that I am proposing. This proposal is approximately a 4.53% total increase. And so total means average of all steps and lanes put together. It's a 4.53% total increase. In addition to, so how this wage scale works, salary scale works, let's say I am a new, fresh, out of college teacher and I'm certified, I would come in lane one, step one, and let's say I'm finishing my first year. Upon finishing my first year, I would advance to lane one, step two. So just in last year's schedule, so 22-23, I'd go from 41,200 to 41,950. So I would advance that step. In my proposal, they would advance that step of $750 plus an additional base increase across the board of $1,200 per step. Any questions in direct relation to what I first went through? So for this year, just moving lanes and steps, we have an expense of $231,880. And then I'm recommending a base of $197,340. The two together equal what you will see over on the reduction spreadsheet. Plus, yep, on that spreadsheet. So the 491,243 is the lane and step increase plus a base of 1,200, plus I calculated the additional FICA and WRS that we'll be paying on top of, so that's where that 491,243 comes from. And if
I caught the step at 12. What was the lane is from 1 to 2? What was, did you say
Lane-
750?
Yep, lane from, so lane one, from step one to step two is 750, and that's a normal kind of step between those
Okay.
lanes. As you, or those steps, as you jump lanes, that increases more,
Yeah.
and then as you increase in lanes, that you go up even more. So like lane two, you step 1,000 from
Yep,
1 to 2.
got it.
And then that 1,000 kind of holds true throughout.
Julie, we used to have, when you moved a You had to have so many hours of professional development.
You had to have credits.
We did away with that, right?
We did, because the point system we found wasn't, we wanted it to motivate people, and we wanted it to be authentic learning that impacted their craft and their passion. And it was more, teacher feedback was, they're jumping through hoops when they could be spending time, working on classroom essentials. So, right, the board voted this one in, I think this is at least now.
But is there anything that teachers are doing that, they have to get done to move to the next lane, or is it just?
They have to be found, because they're evaluated each year, they have to successfully pass their evaluations. So if you're on a plan of improvement, you can be frozen.
Even like, not a new year.
In your exact cells, so.
So in your exact cell.
So ultimately, like if that was the case for a teacher, they would still get the base, they wouldn't get the jump, the move, but they would still get the base
Oh,
increase.
sure, that increase.
Yep.
Okay, so the only difference is based on health and, 7 to 14, and transportation 5 to 10 is the only difference between scenario 1 and 2, correct?
Correct, so anything in green, I have pretty much verified or am bringing you tonight. Anything in white is not, I do not have.
It's a guess, well, yeah, those two are a guess, we know that.
I am in negotiations currently with Maliette. They came in with a CPI of 15%, and I almost fell off my chair. And my face must have said it all, because he's like, I don't think we'll settle there, and I'm like, it's not even in my vocabulary. So we're currently in negotiations yet. Really hoping that comes in pretty reasonable.
The problem's going to be the cost of gas.
And actually, we have a really good method set up right now where Tim does fantastic in buying in bulk, and am grateful for that, because he has the storage space. So he really plays the market. And so we actually have been pretty steady for the last few years, because we started a fuel surcharge increase based off of what he actually pays. And he's pretty much breaking even, and we're very happy with the amount that we're paying in that. What he is seeing is the cost of maintenance. A $35,000 bus 5 years ago is now $100,000 today. He just looked at buying 2 more, and they're about 130 totally, 130 apiece. And so, return on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, and his parts and pieces, so, yeah. So yeah, the green stuff is kind of the set in stone,
Yeah.
the others are still mobile.
Yep.
Any questions on the certified as a teacher's salary? One reason why I am bringing the proposed that I am is a total increase across or average, and a similar base increase keeps the gap the same. That gap between the highest paid and the lowest wage doesn't continue to grow bigger. If you do a percentage across the board, that gap increases. The lower get less of a raise, the higher get more of a raise, and you just keep spreading that span. We're looking at it as we are now with a total increase or average increase. There is going to be some differences, but it keeps that gap the same, and everybody moves.
Okay.
in sync.
Mhm.
And may I mention, we haven't forgotten about staff feedback, especially for teachers who spent the better part of their career, all of their career in our district. So let's say those with 25 years and to go. The notion of we've been forced to use sign-on bonuses to fill some positions. So what about bonus for those who stay? And so we have looked at the numbers, well, Katie has, and then shared with me a few times now. We like the notion of a stipend because it matches what the bonus did for the sign-on. So it's one-time money. And looking at that, so to be determined too. Just wondering if you had any thoughts on that. I think we have 36, did you say, or
39 that are 20-year and longer, 39.
which is pretty remarkable.
I am.
Stipend is the best way, because then they understand it's a one-time,
Right.
thank you for staying with us this long.
Right.
The only ones that'll be upset are the 19ers.
Well, we talked about that too, and then those looking for a guarantee, let's say it is 25 years, well, is this something the board's going to do every year? You know, when we hit 25 and,
Well, I think that discussion ties into, are we going to do sign-on bonuses every position or year? And I think that's an ebb and flow thing because we didn't do sign-on bonuses.
right, prior to ESSER.
Correct.
And when we had a significant pool of candidates.
Correct.
But when you, yeah, and I can confidently say sign-on bonuses are only used as necessary. It's never offered at the start, of course. And if there are two qualified candidates, we'll take the one who costs less, certainly if they're both quality. But in situations where we have to lock someone in or go without, then that's when we put it on the table.
So I don't like that answer because I didn't give a clear answer either, and I like clarity. But I think the reason that discussion, that I brought that up in the past in this committee is simply because it was a valid point that was brought up. And it is tying into what, out of necessity, we are doing right now to hire. And so I would see it tying in and being reviewed in the same capacity that offering those bonuses, sign-on bonuses, are currently in a continual assessment of that.
That's a good point. There may come a time when we don't have to rely on sign-on bonuses because the market will have more candidates, but until that happens. So I guess for my clarity, should we have that proposal added at the end of this month in with this?
Oh, the stipend? I think it's a good idea.
How much is it?
You might want to tell us what you're thinking of a number, not in, maybe like to me later.
And we're open to your guys' thoughts too. I mean, this is a pull out of a hat
Yeah.
scenario.
And then the other thing is, what's the difference between 20 and 25? Because it'll be less.
We've looked at that too.
So just some thoughts,
Yep.
Okay.
yeah.
Did you have a
But I think
question?
it's a good idea.
Well, I was asking what that number is.
We do not have a definitive at the moment, but we want to make it enough that it is a thank you and not small enough that they would take it,
As an
Okay.
affront.
Yeah.
Yes.
More than a
Make-
check.
Yes, yes. And debating on years, it could change. So we will have some more discussion and kind of see where that goes. Looking at now support staff plan. I put 2 in front of you because I wanted to kind of show you, we were talking about a 4.5%. And this is a really good example of how putting a flat percent across the board widens the gap. If you take a look at the bottom half, row 18, column 20, that is our highest paid area, and it comes in at $31.91. At a flat 4.5%, that position alone gets $1.50 or $1.48 roughly in a increase. And if you look at row 12, column 0, our lowest paid position, they go from 11.44 to 11.95. They get 51 cents. So that just shows how those ends kind of go on both ends. But that is a flat 4.5% across the board. The other one that I propose is a flat dollar amount across the columns. Now, if I wanted to hit that right around 4.5% flat dollar amount across the columns, it would have been 93 cents. And if you're a support staff and we're gonna give you 93 cents, or maybe we give a little and we say, we're gonna give you a buck raise, $1 an hour raise. That's what I'm proposing, is $1 an hour for all support staff. Comes in at 5.07%, so it's a little higher than, what I had shown in previous spreadsheets. But I think there's a lot to be said in that 7-cent difference. So with that, that is what I put on the spreadsheet, the reduction spreadsheet. It's roughly an increase of the $194,000 for support staff. So it would be, my recommendation to you would be the dollar across the board for all support staff. And if you look on the very back, it does show the percentages. It's a 2-pager. It prints it all through. So it has proposed last year and then the percentage change across the board. And on the 4.5 flat, it shows the dollar amounts per.
Yeah.
Because that's the
Okay.
Any questions or comments or?
Well, the only big comment is we're gonna have less money, and we're looking at, just based on, let me get the green sheet again. I'm looking at, basically $1.5 million with the worst and $437 with the best. So, again, I will just say we either have to have a balanced budget or we're gonna be taken out of fund balance.
Yep, and it's actually pretty common to project expense higher than revenues when you are bringing budget status to the board. So to come in with a little deficit is understandable. If I was able to shake my magic ball or crystal ball, I would love to know what the proposal's gonna be.
Yeah, but then again, pretty much the last 2 years when I talked with Tim about Fund 46 and using that, we've added money to Fund 46 every year. So maybe it'll still work out and maybe we won't be adding to Fund 46 next year, but we might be okay. So.
And that's a good way to look at it. You're exactly right. We have added a decent amount to Fund 46 for the last few years.
Yep.
So I would love to continue, but
Me too.
yeah.
But
yeah.
it is what it is.
Absolutely.
Okay, if the state was only doing a revenue and an increase, what would
For what?
make up this deficit of 1.5?
750 per pupil.
Per pupil.
How'd you know that off the top of your head?
Because she is.
3 million.
Oh, got it, okay.
We've ran a lot of numbers lately. 750 per pupil.
And that's not unreasonable to think that might happen.
No, AEF is even a lot of the other entities are buying for 1,510, 1,510 is what they're asking. Because what they've done is they've looked over the last 4 years, so the 2 upcoming and the two prior, and with not getting an increase, they figured minimum CPI and where that lands. And that would actually bring us up to what Mary Fezkowski was also implying, is that she wants to ask for all low revenue, or all the revenue ceiling to be brought up to the average, which is 11,200, 11,500 per pupil, which would be a substantial increase for Antigo.
Yeah.
So my proposal in here is very conservative. That's how I play the game. I don't want to
understand.
promise rainbows when you could be handed a shovel. So we want.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yes.
conservative, not over, so.
Dave, when the Republican Party talks to Mary Falkowski and Representative Callahan, what are they asking for?
They aren't.
What do you ask for when you talk to them?
I haven't.
What do you think Danny asked for when you talk to them?
I don't know.
Do you think?
I haven't seen Calvin in probably 5 months.
Okay. Do you think there'd be any benefit in our board asking them as a board for an increase?
I think it would.
And how do you think we'll go about doing that?
Well, I can call him. I have his number.
No, I'm saying, how would our board go about coming together as a board and saying, we want a revenue increase of
$1,500.
and a special ed increase of
Ma-
30%?
My suggestion is that we would put it on the agenda and as a recommendation to our state senator and our state assemblyman, and approve it, discuss it, come up with a number, and send it. And then send it in a letter from Julie,
So you're suggesting-
representing the board. I think that's a good idea,
You're
Andy.
suggesting that that be on the next board meeting?
I just did.
Okay.
I believe, but it's your idea and it's a good idea. So thank you.
Well, I suggested this last September or October, and I'm glad that we're going to move ahead with it in April.
Because they'll be making that decision here in the next few months.
Yes.
And to be honest, Andy, my idea was way back then is that it's too early and they're not going to get serious about this number until it's at the end, because that's how they work.
One thing,
That's how they work, but, to have the discussion with them, I think they have to hear it a lot of times, and you have to hear it from a lot of people. It's okay for them to hear it from me 3 or 4 times, but it's much more powerful if they hear it from our board.
So I have no problem with us
So
putting.
this month,
Yes,
okay.
yeah, have it on in April.
if we have it at April's board meeting on Monday, the 24th, the 26th, the Joint Finance Committee is in Minocqua for listening sessions. And I do plan on being there. And
It
at
would
the
probably help if I'm there,
at the last board meeting. I
because
can
they'll
attend it.
recognize my face.
Yep, yep.
2 of them anyway.
I encourage anyone on the board.
I should be able to go with you
Okay. If-
on that date. I don't think I have anything planned.
It's at the Lakeland Union High School.
I would love to go.
6 a.m., we figured?
6 a.m.
6 a.m., we'll get there. Talking time starts at 10, but to be first on the list and have our names, SAA and a few other school board administrations are hoping to fill the first 2 hours with just school finance. So they're going to hopefully have a good turnout. So,
And when Katie says 6 a.m., she's so serious.
What, as in be there at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
at Lakeland?
in Minocqua, yeah.
Or Minocqua. I'm already yawning because I'm on a medicine that, no, I shouldn't even go there. But wow,
And I.
that would be about,
Yeah, yeah.
I think today I crawled out of bed at like 9:15, and that was early.
Dave, we would have to determine how many people have to be there at 6 a.m. and if we can kind of sign you up. Because nobody would testify before 10.
Depends who takes me out to breakfast, I'm just kidding.
So you guys can figure out those details, is what I'm
But,
hearing. It
no, I'll
sounds like
go.
we're going to be very
I'll go.
proactive and get a good spot.
So, moving now from the recommendations of the salary to the budget reduction spreadsheet, I have now started color coding. Thank you to Tim, I've learned how to do that. And the green are the things that we kind of know, or I have proposed to you guys some more solid numbers on. My hope is.
Me
Yep.
talking, yeah, okay.
Yep, my hope is that by next month, we can have the other three in green and be moving those along in May.
Okay.
Any further questions, let me know, but it hasn't changed much. Fiscal overview. I was not able to run this as of the last day of the month because I would have had to wait till today, and I wanted to get this and get it to you guys ahead of time, so it's as of March 29th. Everything is really trending as expected. You will see there that the expenses are a bit increased, but so is revenues. One thing I do want to point out is March was a 3 payroll month. So that is why you are seeing an increase specific in, as big as it is in salaries, because there was a 3rd payroll in this March. It will balance out, but
Oh, yeah,
just a little goodness. Any questions on where we?
twice a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I keep forgetting, this does not matter, but they may want to.
Oh, it does matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a spelling
The
thing, it's
English
not a
teacher
big,
didn't even catch that.
I have a few times, so I just don't feel like in the meeting is the most appropriate, but I forget, so.
I've used
I
this
looked at it,
spreadsheet
I
going
looked,
forward,
I
so-
looked at it, it was purchase services to me.
Yeah.
Can't unsee it now.
Okay,
We won't point that
It's
out.
like the typo in my beautiful photo essay preview story on the musical, and there was a capital N at the end of production. or something, and I'm like, oh.
I think we're good.
We're good.
Anything else? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
I can fix
Thank you,
that.
guys.
Well, we will call the meeting to order. And start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Any public comment? I should have just checked now. Okay. Roll call, please, Mary Kay.
Jill Maddick Nelson,
Here.
Dr. Dave Bardo,
Here.
Jamie Schrader,
Here.
Amy Downs.
Here.
Dr. Julie Sprague,
Here?
Danny Pyatt. And Mike Waninger is joining us.
Someone's over here though, is it?
That's fine.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to move over here.
Yeah, that sounds good.
that.
Sorry, I realized I messed up my own order, but.
What?
Okay, so it was asked to provide a little bit of information, kind of like the history, a little bit of the district around some of our classes that use more of a standards-based approach. Just to be clear, there's very few classes at our high school that have this structure currently. Historically, our world language department started off with it. We'll show a little bit of a timeline here. But this year, we only have one CTE course that is trying it out, one science course, which is biology, and then we have a couple of family and consumer science courses. I think maybe 3 or 4 she's trying out with that approach. And then if we think of our elementary schools, up through grade 2, they use a standards-based approach in their structure when they evaluate their students. Kids are learning so rapidly at that age, it's a lot easier to really get specific on the learning targets of students. And then at 3rd grade is when it kind of starts to change, and historically, that's kind of how that goes. So just a kind of general overview before we start. So just to ground us a little bit in some of the key features of our mission and vision of why this is something to discuss. So this grading approach focuses on each and every student, and it really helps with targeting that learning success for our students to experience. I've included a couple collective commitments here. I'm not going to read them to you, but out of our 10, there are about 5 of them that support talking about grading practices, making sure that we're doing what's best for every student, and making sure that we're supporting them in the ways that they need. And also a lot of this work comes down to teachers working in a collaborative structure. And Mike Waninger is here today. He's one of our world languages teachers. He teaches German and has for quite a few years here in the district. And this year he is a partial instructional coach here at the high school and has had some conversations with teachers around really refining the process of looking at their standards, their learning targets, and how students are assessed. So we also want to align all of our work to our district continuous improvement plan. So here are 2 of our leadership learning targets, So these are in our district improvement plan. So making sure that staff are using data to drive their instruction. We want all teachers doing that at all levels. And also that teachers are identifying their essential standards and assessing them in learning target form. So meaning breaking them down. Sometimes they can be pretty meaty. And making sure students are understanding each of the critical parts of those standards. Okay, so grading for learning, which is also referred to as standards-based grading. It really is a process where you take essential standards and then you refine them into learning targets. So like I said before, a standard can be pretty meaty and have multiple parts. And so then you would break it into meaningful, doable chunks for the student. That would be your learning targets for the day. So you might hear of teachers talking about I can statements or students will learn today. And then you would have a formative assessment of how that student is doing it. So it may look like an exit slip. It could look like a checkout of the day. And you're seeing how they're doing on that learning target. So if I'm in an elementary classroom and I'm talking about students recognizing the long E sound with the magic E at the end, that might be my learning target for the day. I'm going to check out by maybe watching them read a sight word or having them decode something with that long E sound in there. And that would be my formative assessment. Now when I get to the summative assessment, it's coming a little bit later down the pike. Maybe we've learned a few skills. Now we're going to see if they can go back and remember that long E sound from earlier, and then that would help us identify if students are mastering this. This is essentially grading for any type of grading, really. That's the pathway you want to follow. But here it's very clear about what the targets are that the students are being asked to make. So the student performance is then really driven by them being empowered in the mastery of that learning.
So I think differently about grading. So traditional systems that we've all been used to throughout our entire lives, they put a lot of emphasis on point acquisition and on the percentage that you eventually get at the end of that. Whereas grading for learning or a standards-based grading, whatever you want to call it, puts a greater emphasis on the mastery of the essential standard and or the learning target. And it just makes it more visible in the grading system, in the grade book. The same could be true for a points-based system if it's very refined and very specific on the standards and the targets, but it just makes it much more obvious for both teacher, student, parent, because we literally will put our essential standards and or learning targets right in the grade book. And you see a proficiency mark come up next to that learning target or that standard that will say advanced, proficient, basic, developing. We rank them on a proficiency basis. So then if, for example, again, just to kind of compare the two systems, if a student misses a day or misses a week or something because of whatever reason, they might come in and say, teacher, what do I have to do? And the teacher says, okay, well, you have to do chapter 14, problems 26 through 32 odd, or whatever you have to do. Whereas in a standards or a targets-based system, that teacher might respond with, you need to learn how to factor. You need to learn how to write a thesis statement. You need to learn how to back a thesis statement up with evidence, and then I'm going to grade you on on your proficiency to be able to do that. And then give the lesson that the teacher taught how to do that specific skill. So it just makes it a lot more specific, I guess.
Okay, so I used a resource which is cited at the end to talk a little bit about, there's a lot behind grading, and being a former teacher, I'll be honest, I modified and changed and evolved my grading system every year that I was teaching, because you become more aware of what things are more valuable in your teaching, what you really want students to walk away with, and there's no rubric that you develop that is great the first time, you're changing it every time, so teachers hold that tightly to their chest. They have some beliefs, and you might have heard of things in the article. If you read that link to the article, there's some effective grading practices and some things that we continue to hold on to that really don't involve grading. You might have heard in the past of some teachers, providing extra credit for bringing in a Kleenex box, or students being able to do certain things and then getting a better grade. When, like maybe a crossword puzzle or a word search, which might not even be related to the learning target. So that article is good. I'm not going to share it here, but if you want to link to it and read it, it just talks about how some things we do, like giving a 0, really doesn't help a student ever dig out of a hole. If you factor that in and they're good at math and they can do the average, some students can figure out, like, I'm really never going to dig out of this hole, so what's the point of even trying? So some beliefs. These are not necessarily things that everyone might believe, but some people think that all teachers, if they're a good teacher, they should give some bad grades. Some students should get an F. If you think of a bell curve or something like that, there should be some kids on the low end of the spectrum as well as the high end. Some people feel like not everyone deserves an A. That might not sit well with you, or historically that might not sit well with people hearing that. Well, Mrs. Dons, she gave everyone an A. Is she really a tough teacher? Does she really know what she's doing? And also a belief is potentially that grades motivate learners. Not necessarily. I think when students are young, they really feed well on positive feedback, but as you experience school and you might start to have some experiences that aren't so shiny and positive, that motivation is a little bit harder to continue to build. So those are some beliefs shared in the book. Also some reality checks that happened about 15 years ago when No Child Left Behind came into play. That's even more than 15 years ago now. Things used to just be about like coverage of standards, like let's get through the material. And then No Child Left Behind really talked more about proficiency of the material that was being covered or gone over in class.
Not even coverage of standards, but
Yeah.
coverage of content.
Yeah, correct.
And maybe not always necessarily related to the standards or the targets.
That's correct. Thank you, Mike, for including that. Also, grades can be misleading. Talking about your own personal grading system, sometimes if people inflate grades with extra credit points, my grading system, I can guarantee, is not the same as Mike's grading thought process. And to really have cohesive thoughts around that can be confusing to students, and then it's kind of playing the school game a little bit. When I came into this role, we didn't have a consistent district-wide grading scale. We had teachers creating their own, and that was causing confusion, especially at some high school grade levels when you're accounting for GPA, high school rank, and things like that. So we had to normalize and streamline some of those things. And also Common Core state standards, as those came out, the rigor was a lot higher. So then that created some space for some reevaluation of how students are performing within those standards.
So a lot of this Amy has kind of touched on already, so I'll kind of skip around. Again, it's just another comparison against traditional grading versus grading for learning or target or standards-based grading. A lot of times, and this is, all of these things don't hold true for every teacher, every classroom, they're just kind of examples of what can happen. A lot of times with traditional grading, it allows there to be a low rate of knowledge, a low level of knowledge hidden within assignments, within texts, within exams, low DOK type questions. Low depth of knowledge type questions. A lot of those things are really easy to slap points on. Think about like multiple choice tests. Not that multiple choice tests are all bad, but like, again, they're really easy to include stuff with low depth of knowledge. Targets in them. Let's see. Again, at the bottom there, Amy referred to before, rigor equals coverage. So if you talk, the traditional example I use with that would be like it always comes up in like a history classroom. We have to cover from the Civil War all the way up through World War II, and we have to get to that, otherwise we fail as a teacher, I guess. But if you break it down, what is really important, yes, teaching those eras is very important in a history class, but teaching the essential skills through the content is what we are really targeting, and that's what the state standards tell us. And in a standards-based system, like I said before, it just becomes more evident that you're doing that because you can put those standards and those targets right into the grade book. So instead of just giving 100 points on a random test, you're giving them a proficiency level on a skill, on a target. On the right side, in contrast to what I was saying, grading for learning allows for higher order thinking skills. All of those standards and targets that we create, we can write those learning targets from the standards at a higher depth of knowledge. At a DOK, it's a 4-step, 4-level system. We could write them at a depth of knowledge level 4, depth of knowledge level 3, or even a 2, but all of those are higher than the lowest ones. And we can be very specific in not allowing us to get into that low rate of knowledge. Let's see. Another big thing, almost to the bottom, second from the bottom point on the right side, and actually those last 2 points. Rigor then now equals complexity versus before, and when rigor equals getting through content and just getting through an amount of material, now we can up the complexity and again up the depth of knowledge of all of our targets throughout the whole system.
So I'm going to give another example.
Yes.
So Mike used the example of a history class, which was my least favorite subject in school, so I'm not going to use facts at all because I will be sorely wrong in my history knowledge. But so thinking about going to a multiple choice test or maybe short answer, you're giving maybe memorized facts, you're giving who was the general of this, what was the date of this, what was the outcome of this, and we've seen those tests, and they're easier to grade, but you covered the content. It might appear that students might know that content by giving correct and factual answers, and sometimes you might have a couple short answer, whereas if you replaced 30 to 50 of those types of questions with 1 or 2 that said, okay, comparing the Civil War to World War I using facts about those wars, what did you notice in the characteristics of the leaders within that war? So now you're only grading really one question, but it's more complex, and you're using the skills of analyzing, you're using both the content standards and the higher order thinking skills as well. You might recall me last spring a lot talking about when we looked at resources, science and social studies and even math curricula now have a lot of process standards, and also the standards that they have are really more about analyzing the content, synthesizing things, being able to comprehend and argue a point for something using evidence. So there's so much more about being able to use the information than just regurgitate the information. And this helps to do that because then students are clear on the task. So some benefits. I'm not going to read these all to you, but you can see we talk to students about wanting to make sure that they're working for growth. It's hard when you're a student, maybe you've missed that week that Mike said, and you have 5 math assignments, and you know they're all going to count for points. And if they all are zeros and you don't do them, that's really going to affect your grade. You really want students to be able to persevere and monitor their goals and recognize that a 0 doesn't mean the end of the road for you.
So to piggyback off of that point that Amy just made, another example of like fluff grading or behavior grading that you might use, not only extra credit, but like late work policies or redo policies. A lot of times those kinds of policies are inhibiting the students. Whereas if you get a 0 on, like she just said, if you get a 0 on a big test, especially if that class has weighted summative tests, it takes students a long period of time to recover from that 1-0 because they have to get it back up to 60%. Whereas in an alternate system like this, there's emphasis put on just the acquisition of that target. So whether that student gets that target now, or they get it later, or whenever they get it, that's all I care about. So in a system like this, I would not assign a penalty for not turning that assignment in on time, or I wouldn't assign I wouldn't give a 0 and say, no, you can't make that up because it's past the date. Because that assessment, I put a lot of power in that, because it has an essential standard or an essential learning target that we've deemed are absolutely necessary. So that student needs to learn that by the time they get out of this grade, out of this class. So I want to make sure that they know that.
And on the flip side, that doesn't mean that being untimely isn't something that we consider, though.
Correct.
So we're just separating the learning from behaviors. So some teachers have asked for that too, like the CTE group, they have created workforce behaviors that they want to see in their classrooms. And they have identified a few of those that they want to see, things around timeliness, writing within the content standard, writing within their content, being able to be transactional, and whether it's a bill for a mechanic shop or an inquiry about a cost for wood for something. And they have separated those from the learning and what the workforce behaviors are, or what school behaviors are. So it doesn't mean that we're not saying that those things aren't important, like timeliness is important. And those are measured in other ways, behaviors, attendance, and other things. But it wouldn't be included as part of the student's learning.
Yeah, sorry if it came across that way. I by no means, I definitely for all of those things, like I would still tell practice students to be timely and whatnot.
Okay, so to better understand that, make sure if anybody, I've had people interested in this topic before now too, so I anticipate somebody might be listening or come back to listen to it. You assigned something to me, it's due March 3rd. Is there due, actually to back it up, is there due dates then? Help clarify that. As a parent, that part just got a little gray or blurred to
Unclear,
me.
yeah.
So this might look a little bit different in everybody's discipline, right? It might not be exactly the same, and again, we're still in our 6th year of doing this, so we're still learning and revamping. But yes, in my class, I really don't give homework. So I would have maybe, for example, we're doing a project right now. I just got off of paternity leave, so they were working on some work while I was gone anyway. They're turning in a project right now, and we're doing presentations in class. And say a student, it happened to me yesterday, it was their turn to go, they weren't ready to present, right? They had a conversation with me, they said, Mr. Monier, I'm sorry, I didn't really practice, I don't feel comfortable going right now. And in this particular instance, I let them not go, which is fine. And the only difference, and I'll have a conversation with that student, I'll still try to teach the student the importance of being timely, being responsible, and all of that. But I won't assign a fault on their grade for that. So I won't assign a consequence to that, and I'll let that student, I say, okay, can you be ready tomorrow? Yeah, I'll be ready tomorrow. And they go tomorrow, and they give an immaculate presentation tomorrow. I'll grade them as well as they did on their presentational speaking standard for German, as if they would have gone the day before. So I won't let just a reason like they were late to downgrade them, because all I'm interested in knowing how well they can do and perform in my presentational speaking standard, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, let's use an easier example.
Yeah, sorry.
So I thought that was a great example, but let's say I have a child who is young and learning their alphabet, okay? You want them to know the uppercase and lowercase 26 letters. Some students learn those by the time they're 4. They have them all nailed down, they're ready to go. Some students don't learn that until kindergarten, and some are still struggling with that maybe in 1st grade. That doesn't mean that you stop or think less of them as a learner, because they're still acquiring the X sound or what the capital Q looks like or whatever. You're still going to continue to do that, and the progress is noted. So teachers at elementary do this all the time. Yep, I have my check sheet, I'm keeping track of these facts they know in math, these letters they know, these sounds they know, these words they can say, and we see that reflected in grades of what we assign our some might consider softer S's or S pluses or whatever, that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. It means that they're meeting their standards at a rate that's higher than, on grade level, or below their peers. Or maybe not yet, maybe they just haven't learned it yet. So what Mike is saying is essentially the same thing, like, you're not saying, just because that kindergartner didn't learn all their letters and sounds in kindergarten, that now you're gonna penalize them with a late grade in first grade. I mean, it sounds silly when you sound like that, but at some point, we started to do that in systems to create accountability and other behaviors we wanted to see in school.
Some teachers do still give the late penalty though, correct?
Well, we don't have everyone grading in this system in our school.
That's
We have
what I
very
mean,
few-
right, some,
Very few classes that
Right.
are.
and so some would, if it was my turn to give the presentation and I wasn't ready, you can bet there would be academic penalties. Grades might be, marked down, or God forbid the 0, because I know that you said it takes a long time. I would argue that sometimes you cannot mathematically overcome a 0.
Depending on how it's
And that
rated.
is completely unfair to the student. But anyway, so while they're sharing this example, I think it is important to know that not everyone has adopted or moved to this
Let me
way
go
of
to the next
thinking,
slide, because
right?
it'll help.
Okay, thank you.
This helps kind of show the timeline of where this kind of started and how it's very slowly made a progression. In 2016, there was a team that visited Poynette School District who has a standards-based system in place, and at that point, they had it in place for a few years. We went there and did some learning for a day as a group. It was high school and middle school. There were a variety of teachers and administrators that went. The high school then created a book study. That there's a link in there to the book if you're interested in looking at it. It's been revised since this date, and the updated link is in there, called 15 Fixes for Grading. And Ken O'Connor is a person who studied this a lot in education. In 2018, 17-18, that year, the World Language Department started kind of using that standards-based approach. They and also the high school administration created a grading handbook. That link is in there of that draft. It was never really implemented because later, as the next school year rolled out, Tom Zamzo was moved to East Elementary as opposed to being here at the high school. So that didn't really take hold. But the World Languages Department kind of tweaked their grading practices and rubric. And then they were kind of on an island a little bit. They were the only team doing it for a couple years. And then CTE was the next one to kind of spark back up the idea of doing their own book study on their own as a CTE department. And they read Grading for Impact. You can see the authors there. Garth Larson is actually an administrator here in the state of Wisconsin out of the Fox Valley. He runs the FIRST Institute, which has a lot of professional development for our state. And then during all of this, World Languages was kind of sharing some of their information and how it was going. And then CTE and biology were seeking more information last year on how to grade differently potentially, because they were seeing that a lot of the things that they were doing, especially in CTE, were skill-based. That was like action that they wanted to see in their classroom. It wasn't rote memorization. They wanted to see tasks being completed that aligns very much with their standards. And then, like I had referenced before, the grades that are doing this, the classes that are doing this, our elementary report card needs a revamp completely. The standards that are in there currently don't necessarily align. And algebra has made some progress this year where they might want to try it out. They're still in those conversations, but they have really refined their learning targets and their test retaking strategies. Mike's been working with them, as well as the high school administration. Mike, can you just share a little bit, like in this timeline, maybe what you saw from both students and parents and teacher feedback, because you've been involved in this process for several years.
So it really started with us after the Poynette visit. Laura Metco, who's been a Spanish teacher here for a long time, she really got interested in this and she piloted. It was one of those years, it was 2017, 18, somewhere in there. She piloted a form of this using a points-based grade book. where she put emphasis on our standards in that grade book, and she put our standards in there in the columns where you would traditionally see like assignments and tests and whatnot. And from there, she says she really loved it, and she told Abby, Abby Maddock and I about it, and we rolled with it. And since then, immediately when we switched, there's a lot of confusion from students and parents. It's different, but I've said this line a lot. Just because it's different doesn't mean that it's worse or that we should be afraid of it. Really, different can be really good, and in this case for us, it really was. It motivated students a lot. When I was in my second year of teaching here, a common assessment I would give would be a vocabulary quiz where it had the vocab terms on one side and they had to spell them on the other side. And I gave 10 points here and I gave 10 points here. And then I gave like 10 of those, in a quarter, and that would add up to 20 or 30% of their overall grade, And what is that quiz actually telling us? That they can spell some words and they know the definition of some words. Whereas now, in my we don't have a vocabulary category. We still teach some vocabulary, but now, instead of just learning that word, I have them use it in their writing. I have them use it in their speaking, in their interpersonal speaking or presentational speaking. And they do much higher level things now. I have way more kids coming out of German 4 that can speak in the language now. And Laura and Abby would back me up on that, because I know that they do too. It motivated kids too, it changed our kids' mindset. So and some of them were frustrated at first, but so where it used to be a points acquisition game, what do I have to do? Can I redo that test? Can I redo my spelling and get this amount of points back and whatnot? Now they realized, I have to use this. Like, I have to actually practice these skills and get better at this in class. And that really changed the mindset of our whole department, both teachers and students.
How many standards do you have for German
Okay, that's a very good question, and it's a big question because the standards for each discipline are very widely in number, and that's where some of this gets kind of unclear, and that's honestly why, I'm not the only reason why, but what has made it a little harder for us to compare across disciplines. We have 5 essential standards.
That sounds, so how long do you work on one standard? Like all 5 of those, do you give an equal amount of time? Or
in our 5 standards, and this, I could talk about this for another hour, so I will try to make this very, very short, and it's very hard for me to demonstrate it without our master rubric in front of you, which I'd be happy to talk about at a different time. But we have each of our 5 standards broken down, and we give them proficiency ratings in each one of those. So in each one of the individual columns that they go up a level in proficiency, it describes the things that they have to do to be that much better in, say, presentational speaking. And now we're even going more in depth to breaking those down into individual learning targets in there. So we spend all year, all of our time is on those 5 standards, and we give them recurring, we call them skill assessments. We just call everything assessments now in each of those 5 standards. So, and it works really well for us. Say a student comes in at the beginning of the year, they've had some summer loss, right? Like especially in a world language. I don't expect them to perform at the same level as they would at the end of the year, in that particular class. So every grade that I give them in the presentational speaking category supersedes the grade before it. So they're constantly striving to get a better grade in that. So, and again, if a student misses an assessment, does poorly on assessment, has a bad day on it, number 1, they can redo the assessment if they want, because all it is for me is a skills assessment, a current, up-to-date skills assessment of where their presentational speaking skills are. And if they want to redo it, I'll let them redo it. If they get the same grade, stays the same. If they get a better grade, it goes up. And but then they have to continually prove it as the rigor goes up, as the year goes on. So again, it's a big system, and that system might not look exactly the same as another discipline. And we're working on that right now, trying to get like CTE and biology in a workable model for them.
So when you get to, you're probably going to cover this, but when you get to the end of the year, you have your 5 main standards. How do you convert that
Okay.
to your class
We have-
ranking letter grade?
Yeah, we have a system where it converts
Yep.
by the computer
Inf-
into a numeric
Yeah,
based.
Infinite Campus does that. So we worked with,
We have representatives from CISA 5 who help set up our grade books. Anything with our student information system, Infinite Campus, it does so much, but that one piece spent a lot of man hours making sure things are converting so that it's not just a proficiency or not proficient. It turns into a letter grade, it turns into a percentage so that it rolls up into GPA, because we know those things are important too.
So
We
do
learned
the
that-
kids think it's fair, like that their proficiency sort of reflects their grade, or?
for the most part, I would say yes. It's been a long time now, and the students that are in our program are all very used to it, and they know what they have to do, and they know what's expected of them. There have been certain instances, especially on the extremes of the system, where, I mean, I think there's a little bit of conversation that could be had about refining it perfectly, but as we go along, if we were to do something wider scale, I mean, the district could talk about that, about setting an exact system for everybody. Right now, CTE and Bio and the other departments that are kind of dabbling right now, they're using the exact same one that we've used for the last 6 years. And we just tailored that to try to make it fair, like what you were just saying, like if you get this many number of advances versus proficients, that equates to an A minus. Or if you get this many number of basics and proficients, that equates to a C plus, or whatever it is, you know. And for the most part, I feel like it's been really good. The biggest thing that we have going for us in that argument is that they can retry if they want to. You know, they can retry any assessment. It's about the skills that they've acquired.
It's a weird, I don't know, you ever read the Case Against Education? George Mason, economist, I forget his name right now, but he's talking about, well, why do you make so much more money when you graduate college versus, 3.5 years? And so they're debating how much in school is just ranking, like a stiff competition, versus what is actually promoting learning.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you're just signaling that you can finish that stuff. And so here, like, this method it is promoting learning, whether it is, like you said before, demonstrating to employers, well, this person will be very diligent or on time, like Tom Zan's always trying to make me on time, and I'm still not. So it's like a weird, like, I don't know if that's a separate category for a report card then, like, this kid is always late, like, come on, I was. But and I don't know if, and maybe for some professions it doesn't matter at all, versus, a really good foreign language speaker,
I would say out of the whole process, the hardest point has been for us to convert, or the hardest discussion and the longest discussion was how to convert those skill assessments into a letter grade again. As far as I'm concerned, I wish I didn't have to report a letter grade, but that's how we all traditionally work, and we have to for the state, and I understand that we should do that, but I just care about getting the students to pass the standards and the targets that the state standards say that they should pass. Yeah.
So is there a continuous conversion throughout the year,
Yep.
this semester? So as a parent, at any point,
It's
they can
instantaneous.
go in to see that? Okay.
Yep.
Can you speak to, or do you know if that's across the board for the courses that are doing this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's
because
the same one.
that mathematical process that we talked through, that World Languages talked through 6 years ago, we took that when all of these other departments were interested, and we copied it to their Infinite Campus. So theirs is functioning the exact same way mathematically as ours is.
So in real time, the grading with proficient or not, the 4, right, it's 4?
Well, I'm gonna say
Yep.
for sure at posted grade time, so
Because that's where,
midterm, term, semester.
I would have to pull up a grade book.
No,
You would-
as soon as a grade goes in there, there's a percentage that comes out.
Okay.
Yep, for both teacher and student.
It seems like math would be really easy to do standards-based grading.
And-
Like, can you do your polynomials or your, I can't remember all these words, but your
Fractions.
quadratic equations and your, I don't know,
And
derivative.
and,
So is that, because that's sort of always been standards or not really? It's,
No, Amy did mention though before, I've been working a lot as an instructional coach this year with the algebra team, and Tillamook did last year as well with that team on getting their targets written. And they're, not to speak for them or anything, but they're ready to like move next year into a system like this. They have 16 targets for first semester and they have 16 targets for second semester. And they want to make sure that all their students hit those targets.
so that's many more than 5. But
It's
it's
many
four
more than
languages,
five.
just different.
Correct, yep, and we've been functioning from, when I say, we don't have 5 learning targets. So learning targets are like kind of the smaller fingers that branch off of the bigger essential standards. We have 5 essential standards at the top. We have more learning targets on the bottom. So kind of a hard process to visualize right now, but they've broken what they want to know, what they want their students to know into 16 roughly per semester.
For you, do you have different ones every year of German? Like, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or is it just more advanced on the
So,
same standards?
so we use the same standards, more advanced. It goes up a level every year.
So you opened up a little bit of a can of worms before, JD, when you mentioned something about, grades matching what is produced. So there's a lot of research around our school ranks matched to ACT scores. Like is the first 1 through 10 in your class earning the highest ACT, which you think it should equate out to some degree. And what the research shows is that that's very rare. And it comes down to some of the nuances that are put into grading systems that are individualized by teacher, that aren't related to learning and grading. There's a lot of room in there for leverage on deeming what's appropriate as opposed to measuring learning. And
What would you say, like in college, right, if the ACT is not an IQ test, but a college success predictor, maybe you could be really smart, but really lazy, so you could do really good on
Right.
this test, and still not be
Absolutely.
diligent enough to actually study. So
Absolutely.
I don't know that I would, I don't know, it seems like all the kids at the top of the class always worked hard. And even some kids who
Are
were
they-
really smart would
Yeah.
work less hard.
I don't argue anyone's working hard, but that those people aren't working hard.
I'm just thinking of
but
my
I'm
high
just
school
talk-
classmates,
Yeah,
not,
talking about what is the outcome of the learning too. Like, is it more about because compliant, had systems able to support them, able to, have people reminding them to get things turned in and whatnot, or is it about the learning that happened in the classroom?
So some feedback I've gotten is that continuous conversion is not occurring. So I would like to use the opportunity, because you've been very helpful with providing a lot of clarity and examples. I'd like to take the opportunity to try and, is there anything that comes to mind when you hear that of student or parent feedback that continuous conversion from proficiency scoring to letter grading is not in real time? Or if there's classes is there grading that's not put into campus until midterm or end of the semester?
That's more likely.
So that part I can't speak on how often the grades are put in.
Fair.
That part
okay.
is that's different for every teacher regardless of
Yep.
grading style or whatever. There have been a couple of, I won't call them bugs or anything, but especially this year we've been kind of, CT has had a couple of issues, but I know when the students look, and I can't remember now exactly, I wish I had a student here to show you. When the students look in their Infinite Campus portal, the percentage grade is not in the same place as all of their other percentage grades. They have to click an extra button on the class and get the term report. and then you can see the updated percentage grade. So that has been a sticking point, when like our students are like, oh, my grade isn't updated, we're like, no, go in there, click here, and then it shows them right where it is. That's been super minor. Other than that, I can't really think of anything that, I mean, when I put it in, we have had a couple other issues where, like problems at the beginning of a grading period, like at the beginning of the year, Miss Frisch, Tracy Frisch, was having problems, whatever, with her system, it wasn't calculating. It was bugging out. And Amy and I have worked on it a lot this year, and it's working now. But that was a weird anomaly. Everybody else
Yeah.
seemed to
Yeah, there's some nuances.
work. Yeah, just a couple little
Which
things.
is fair, and you'll have that in any type
Yeah.
of grading system. So is there any competency-based grading that, okay, would there be any classes or a shift where there's only grades posted at midterms because you're looking at a holistic learning? So maybe you don't post as often, or maybe there's not as many grades
Okay.
given throughout the semester that it could reflect.
I can't speak to that. So, in comparison, again, to the two styles, we do definitely post less grades than we used to, less overall assessments. But what I've always said to that, especially like you see like a math grade book a lot of times has 1,000 different entries in there, you know. My rebuttal to that has always been, my one assessment that I put in, I think has greater importance and specificity than 30 of other assessments or things that are put in, right?
Like your vocabulary.
Yeah, like my vocabulary quiz before. Everything that I put in is a direct skills assessment on the learning targets and on the standards of what the student can do skill-wise. An example of the opposite of that would be a 10-point homework check where the teacher is checking, merely walking by the desk and checking that it's done, right? It's a completion assignment. When we put that completion grade into the grade book, yeah, that student got 10 out of 10, they got it done. That grade has all kinds of problems in validity everywhere. Like, we don't know if the answers are right. We don't know if the student did the answers themselves. We don't know. It's a very invalid process, right? So my one assessment, I think, is more valuable than putting 100 assessments in. And that speaks to the differences in the system. The traditional system is based, it's supposed to be accurate because it collects so many points. It's an average, right? Whereas I'm putting a more specific value on that.
So I think a concern that I would anticipate with this in general is, although it may be a more comprehensive, accurate assessment grade that is being entered, I anticipate pushback would be the disconnect from the parent to student, because I have literally nothing as a parent to know my child's engaging, to, you know what I mean? Like if I'm waiting
Yeah.
until halfway through the semester, now I'm
So-
behind if my student is not engaging and is getting leniency of, I'm not prepared for this assessment, great, what's your time frame? Still not prepared, you know what I mean? So that timeliness, I've questioned, is the timeliness going to be there for the student regardless of the grading scale?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then,
What I failed to mention before that I should have said when I was talking, okay, let me remember both points here. First, the timeliness
Yep.
point, and then the frequency of entry point. Bring me back to that if I forget. The timeliness, in that instance where I said where the student wasn't ready to give their presentation, I put a no evidence grade into the grade book. It effectively gives them a 0.
so they're still graded in real
And
time.
it drops their grade real time right now. The parent can see it, the student can see the repercussions. So right now, they have a consequence for that action. The difference is tomorrow, when they have made their arrangement with me and they come and they do that presentation and it rocks, I give them their real skill assessment back. because I'm not a late work teacher. I'm a German teacher. You know, I want to grade the German standards. I don't want to grade that late work. I'll still preach to the student. I'll still call the parent if the student isn't doing their assessments on time. So if that helps kind of
No, it
clear up
does.
that situation a little bit, that's a big tool that we've used. And then the second one, the difference in frequency of entry might vary between disciplines, and in my opinion, the one that algebra is going to be hopefully moving to next year is a really great model. They use their, I don't know if you're familiar with, they use their LTQs, their learning target quizzes weekly on Fridays, and they're gonna still use those. They're literally called learning target quizzes, and they've kind of been setting themselves up in the years prior for this. And so you'll have real time, maybe not day by day, but you'll have weekly feedback on that. And they do an exit slip on Monday, and they do their learning target quiz on Friday. And both of those are feedback points. And again, and instead of grading, say, all that homework in between there, which we just talked about, we don't know if homework is actually doing its job or not, especially if it's a completion grade, which it is in math usually.
But reflected in the LTQ then, because.
Correct, or reflected in the LTQ, which it could be. In this case, their LTQs are also going to spiral. So like, if that student fails, I'm going to use factoring again as an example on this week's LTQ. On next week's LTQ, there's going to be another little factoring section. There's going to be a section there for them to prove that they can factor again. And if they nail it this time, and they nail it consistently, their grade goes up in that factoring learning target. Because what do we want our students to know? We want them to know how to factor,
Correct.
right? They have to, especially in algebra. They're going to use factoring in every single math class for the rest of their life after that. If that student doesn't learn how to factor, good luck. And commonly we get to the next class, a geometry teacher, a pre-calc, or an advanced algebra teacher might say, you guys learned how to factor when you were freshmen. You should know how to factor. Well, they got a 62%. They barely passed algebra. And somewhere hidden in that 38% that they failed was factoring.
Mm-hmm.
But in this model, we know where it is. We know what they didn't learn, and we know what they have to do.
Are they still going to be doing the learning assessments as a group, or will they be individual?
So, ongoing process. I just had a discussion with them last week, a really good discussion that's up in the air yet. It's ultimately up to them to choose that. I wish one of them were here to talk about the discussion that we had, but we talked about validity a lot in that, whereas group learning assessments can be exactly that, group learning opportunities or assessments. Group work is a great tool to learn together and to bounce ideas and to help each other and whatnot. Is it 100% valid? Can you give a group a grade and tell what each individual student can do from that one singular grade? Maybe it's not so valid, but those are ongoing conversations that we're having right now and that I'm leading as an instructional coach with multiple teams.
That one's actually just a very interesting conversation because our math is a struggle. There's a lot of students that repeat certain classes. So I'm going to be respectful to time, and plus you're not in the math department, so respectful to you too. But that one's a very intriguing conversation. I think seems very reflective of struggles and successes then. But I think it's a separate, to be respectful on time, I don't know that we go there right now. But
The thing about standards is I think it'd be more interesting reporting to the board. Like if you came and said, instead of these people are at the state average, these are below, if you came and showed us your 5 standard and said,
How many students have mastered them?
yeah, say 20, because then it's more, I don't know, it's more interesting. certainly. It probably takes longer. Maybe we gotta divide it up.
It's more
and say,
specific.
You have
Or,
to-
you know,
yeah.
we'll do math one month and
Yeah.
something else one month, and then you can say, these kids know 26 letters, and these kids can factor, and these kids.
So just keep in mind, like at the elementary, pretty common that we talk in that kind of talk. And then it kind of loses that a little bit as it gets older.
Right.
And now we have a very small group of teachers trying this out at the high school. So I don't think that's in the near future necessarily, but,
But in the elementary,
Yeah.
you could, you know,
Yeah.
you could say, like you said, these kids can do long E, 40% of them can't. And I don't know if you'd say, because your Fastbridge can sort of, is it Fastbridge now?
yeah.
If the Fastbridge could say, well, all 3 elementary schools, only 60% can do long E, right?
Yeah,
that
and we
would-
give a lot of subtests at the elementary and fast that can get down to some of those discrete skills as well, but there's a lot of teacher informal observation and formative assessment all the time.
So it wouldn't be that, we wouldn't be making you do a massive amount of work to say if you picked 5 interesting ones and said, hey, this is what we're working on. Just as like,
Yeah.
from a board member perspective, it'd be more interesting than.
I would think that I would hope maybe that at your level, you'd want to see a more like broad view of things that will move the needle forward. You know, like, you can pick a discrete skill, but like just one in of itself might not be a good depiction of the overall progress that a student might make.
Is it okay if we move on? Because I feel like the remaining parts of your slides are important, and I have lots more questions anyway, and so I'm just wanting to make sure we have
Well, we
enough
knew-
time to
I thought we
finish.
only had 2 agenda items. So
I
we
know,
need to make it last a
we
little
do, we
bit.
just have, I know,
kidding,
but we didn't get
I'm
to the end of the
kidding.
slides yet,
So
Sadie.
here we are. So this is really the only next steps. We have some new courses. I just got some feedback today from one of the teachers about, you know, relooking at some things that they're considering and thinking about now that they've used it a little bit. So we have to look at how that's working, is it working, and what we need to improve. There's been some discussion with the elementary principals about what we can do. All of them are not a big fan of our current report card. How can we make that more closely aligned with those higher-arching essential standards that eventually get broken down into the learning targets? Algebra is on a good path. Now, will that decision be made to move forward? We'll see. It sounds like they feel like they're pretty ready, but we want to make sure that things are ready and the communication is good so that they know. And then this is always an ongoing process. Now, something that we've learned is as teachers become more confident in their understanding of teaching and assessing standards, they're more comfortable with reporting out in this way. So I'll give you an example that's just anecdotal. 4th grade team a couple years ago, they have never been together in a building. They were together as 4th grade teachers, and they were struggling with giving numbers to things that their students were demonstrating. They were like, it'd be much better if we could write a skills-based report card. What are they mastering at 4th grade? And they did choose to put in an insert in the 4th grade report card about describing what that B even meant. Because if you think of that means pretty much nothing. It meant they understood 80% of the material perhaps. But what did they really learn within math? So they chose to put an addition in with the report card to like identify, here's the skills they were learning, here's where that someone can continue to grow, and here's where they really found some success, and here's what we're approaching at. So that was a little more meaningful as a teacher to be able to give a more complete picture of the student, but then also to receive that on the parent end too. So this isn't right now, this is not a big rock of our district. This is not like a pillar of our improvement plan. This is not something, because we've had a lot of work to do with just our standards, looking at our resources, and also understanding writing good assessments too, to match those essential standards that we chose. Now that doesn't mean that teachers, just like students, some are ready to take another path and want to try this out. And we did allow that for a few groups this year to try it out. When Mike talks about the complexity of standards, he has 5 that they assess in world language. Like biology, they chose to assess 9. They have science process standards, but then they also have a content standard to make sure that they're identifying that.
English has a lot.
Yeah, in English, that would be a whole,
English has a
that
lot.
would be a feat. I mean, I don't think we're ready to do anything necessarily with that, but the reason we wanted to go more on the side of information is because we knew you didn't really have too much information, And as far as the nuts and bolts of like what it looks like and stuff at this point, we didn't include some of that because it would kind of get lost in understanding if we didn't have some background information too. So I just
Yes.
want to show, if you are interested in some of those resources, I have the link for the Ken O'Connor book, and then here are also the resources if you're interested in looking at those at all. We have some copies too in the district.
Are there any colleges in Wisconsin that want to see the standard assessment in addition to the letter grade, or is that not really happening here yet?
Not that I know of, I don't know.
I haven't been involved in the college application process. That'd be a good question for like the high school counselors, especially like Kelly Levick helps specifically with seniors. But there are a lot of students now coming from non-traditional paths of learning, virtual schools, homeschooling, charter schools. All the schools are not reporting out in a way of GPA and class rank and grading transcripts. A lot are taking a portfolio-based approach. Whereas other information is also possibly included if you haven't. But such are not the days where ACT test score is required to fill in this application and turn it in to whichever college of your choice. It's changing slowly, but it is evolving. But as far as specifics, I would be wrong if I said anything more.
So at this time, in terms of action, steps, and goals for the district, right now this is being implemented based upon departments that are interested in doing so. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not only departments as a whole, but collaborative teams mostly that are
Yeah,
interested.
not whole departments, yeah.
Okay.
Because, world language,
I guess math, we talked about that wouldn't be a whole department, that was one course.
that was just
Okay.
the algebra collaborative team.
Like for CTE, they have dozens of courses. It's one class in the CTE
Yeah,
group that chose to do this.
same in science,
Yeah,
it was
so-
only biology.
It's an undertaking to really dig deep in the understanding and communicating that way with your students and really looking at things differently. And some teachers try to work it out without working it out, like fitting it into a points-based system in the current structure, like Laura did that first year. So sometimes this seems like a better fit. But like I said, this isn't a current pillar that we're working on heavily, but we don't want to hold back if there's something that can help student success in their learning.
You did a really nice job bringing all this, and I appreciate you for being here too.
I told you he'd be a good asset to have in the conversation. I paused the conversation, I was like, Mike's on paternity leave, he's got to be here.
Yeah, it was very helpful, and I'm hoping it is for those that have reached out to myself or other board
Yeah.
members.
And if
What
people
does
have
this mean
questions,
and the
yeah.
why? It makes sense, and I get what you're saying. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around it because I'm not in education and I am a parent, and so it makes sense, and I'm trying to apply what you've shared in how this pans out for my own student. So I'm hoping it's helpful
Yeah.
for
If
others.
people have questions, you can reach out. We're not like jumping 2 feet in and everyone's doing this. That's not how we're approaching it at this point at all, because we have other work to do that needs to come. But, think of it like at my job, if Julie told me, Amy, you're performing at a 75% rate, that's pretty meaningless to me. Like, I would want to know what are the skills that, you get that in the real world. You get the skills that you need, and that's what we want to provide, more specific feedback to students.
And in the end, those skills are what makes up the state standards. And that's what we have to teach. So this more accurately bridges that gap in between numbers and percentages and what we're paid to teach or what we're certified to teach.
Are we actually required to teach the state standards, or if we don't, the test would just be very difficult?
We are required to teach standards. So we can choose to align with the Common Core standards, or we can make up our own. And I do not feel like
You want
that.
to do that?
Well, not at this moment, I don't want to do that, but I also feel like there are very, very few schools that choose to do that. And typically, there's schools that are in a different position than we are currently.
I've been sitting here trying to think of how I would compare Abraham Lincoln to Woodrow Wilson.
Good luck. I know very little about either of
Did
those
you?
people, so.
That's a perfect example, though, with what they were talking about.
I
the
didn't know if you actually meant that as an
Depth of
actual, like, how
knowledge.
you compare a civil war to a
Yeah.
world war, and I was thinking that sounded like a hard question.
Yeah.
Because it forces you.
You can send it to me later.
Right.
There's no due date.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
We're gonna let him head out because he has a little baby at home. and Probably wants to
Could've
get
brought
him some
him along.
bedtime snuggles.
Yeah, it's gonna be bedtime right
Yeah.
there, so.
Did you bring it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. Then the other new business, the curriculum review implementation update.
Yes, so it doesn't look too much different than last time I shared it with you. We created some beliefs as a music team since the last time, and I just met with one of their subgroups today to talk about things that they might want to look at in the band area as far as supporting the curriculum. In ELA, we have scored 2 resources and we're about to score our 3rd. We did some site visits. In Merrill to look at CKLA and just met with a rep in person. She came live and in person from Indiana to answer their questions.
Was
and
the
that
rep any good?
Yeah, she was great, and it was so much information. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And
So Merrill implemented it.
CKLA, correct, at their K-5. So 6 and 7 weren't able to see that in action, but they did talk to the rep and had their own meeting with her. And then in math, we
What'd you say, what's
reviewed
the third one?
2 resources. In ELA, looked at CKLA, we looked at My Perspectives. At the elementary level, My View, My Perspectives. And then we're also looking at getting a 3rd and potentially 4th at different grade levels to look at yet. There's a desire to look at Wonders, which is a McGraw-Hill. We did a recent survey and provided more information for the teachers to do like background checks and like look at information, some trial logins to see what it looks like a little bit, to get a sample, to get a better view. So Wonders was one of them, and then there was a second one. Give me a second. And then at the secondary level for 6 and 7, they wanted to look at a different one. There's some splits sometimes with publishers, so it's hard to put everything in the same one. Okay, into literature, 6 and 7, which is a Houghton Mifflin product, is the next one they're going to look at. Wonders, which is a McGraw-Hill product, and Into Reading is the other one at ELA for the K-6. So we're getting samples of those, and we'll score CKLA next week. And then music, like I said, I met with band. I'm going to meet with choir in the upcoming weeks. And elementary's in a peculiar position because we only have one elementary music teacher right now because we haven't had a second all year. We had a long-term sub, and so we're trying to decide how we create a little bit of a team around that, because one person making the decisions, that's not too comfortable. And they would like a book resource, because right now all they have is an online resource, and that is good, but with music, it's kind of like learning to read too. It's nice to have some tangible materials as well, and they want to make a good decision. So I did share with that team, like, if we need to postpone until we potentially have a hired second person on the team, we can postpone if we don't feel comfortable. But we'll see where that goes. They're willing to have a conversation at least to start and see where we might go.
Well, and you've said all along too that this is fluid
Yeah.
and can change, and that's a great example of it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's going well. It's, I think it's very different for our teachers. And what I'm noticing too with the grades that have current resources that we purchased being implemented, I need to do a better job of being really clear on like cut points of when things are expected and how to support certain things, because I went from it like an all or nothing kind of approach, and it needs to be a little more pieced out, I think, to make it more manageable for teachers, so that we're, like familiar with this resource, familiar with the physical, familiar with the online. So Q4, we're really gonna do some targeted coaching. We have coaching sessions from the people who are from the resources that we purchased. So we're gonna target in on what haven't we seen yet that we want to see with a specific look for document, and meet with individual teachers or teams to make sure that those things are ready to go and that they have better understanding of maybe things we've missed this year.
So are you saying for the staff to hit certain target points in terms of the review of the resource by a certain time, so that way,
The implementation of it.
okay.
Like on the other
Okay, see,
side.
that's,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
So I shifted from
Yep,
reviewing to
you
now
did, and I-
implementing.
Yep.
I could have done a much better job of being clear on like, okay, you know, by the end of quarter one, we want to see this. By the end of quarter two, we want to see this, and, you know, how do I know that? Now, we've done surveys and teachers, I trust what they're saying and they're doing their very best, but then it's easy to not take the next step to something that's harder when you're familiar with something, and that might seem hard to overcome. You know, I think of the technology barrier. If you're a younger teacher, and I'm not saying anything about older teachers, but sometimes it's harder to like really get the knack of some of those technology things. Even for me now, like everything's integrated into like Canvas. And like people are like, yeah, you just click on here. I'm like, okay, back it up. Like we're gonna pause the video. And if you grew up with that as your life, as a child, that's like second nature to you now. Like there are teachers who are young 20s who they prefer to do that as opposed to look at their physical book. And so it's just coming together on how everyone learns, and that's why we ask those questions of the teachers. How do you learn best? So
I think that's very helpful feedback too, and that it's well received and appreciated, because we have not had this process, and you initiated it, and you've worked very hard on it, and part of that is also looking to see what worked, what didn't work, and so I appreciate that too, because it's only going to make each department stronger, and ultimately our district stronger when we see we've made the purchase, but now what, and so I appreciate that feedback too.
yeah, and in recognizing this, so when we talk as teams, you know, like I have some instructional coaches and also our principals, like when we look at really rolling out like a new ELA resource for multiple grade levels, we have to be pretty clear on what we're expecting at each checkpoint, because there's a lot of pieces to an ELA curriculum, and we want to make sure that we're hitting key pieces first. And then, you know, it'd be nice if you could, the next one will be X, and if you're ready for that, you can move sooner, but we want to make sure this is in place, you know, at this point in time, and really be clear about that planning. And we started talking about that already. I know that was not really done well the last time we rolled out a resource, where it was kind of like we had nothing and then it was like a small piece and no other options. And I don't want teachers to feel like they don't have the liberty to still continue to use things that they know and trust, and still teach the other pieces of the content, because that can't wait either. So, yeah. So questions on that, where we're at with that process either?
No.
Do you gonna score core knowledge language art at a PD day, or is it like they're all
We don't
doing
have
it
any
individually?
PD days left, so they're all after school. And there's 2 pieces for CCLA, and they're gonna get scored together.
The language strand and the knowledge, or the skills strand and the knowledge strand?
It's gonna come together, because only above a certain grade level do they have skills. Second grade,
Yeah.
second or third? Yeah. So not everyone would be able to participate if we have a 4K17.
And then are you gonna have them vote? Or are you hoping it'll be a consensus, or?
Well, we're taking consensus scores as we go. So then we'll kind of rank them, but what's been interesting is even though we have foundational skills, foundational beliefs that we agreed on as an ELA team, what we're noticing is sometimes there's discrepancies in grade level. So like 6, 7 is looking for very different things than a K2 teacher, even though we believe we want to see the same things in our ELA students. So sometimes we're noting a discrepancy in the scores, like, okay, K3 scored a 2, whereas 6, 7 scored this a 1, and we make note in our notes so that we're clear on why we might feel that way.
Does core knowledge language art go all the way to 7th grade, or does it stop at 6th?
7th it does. It does. All right, anything else?
Amy, I thank Mike
Yeah.
for being here. He did a great job for us. Well, what I mentioned to him is that I keep hearing about Infinite Campus, and parents are struggling with
Okay.
Infinite Campus. So what I said to him is, a good idea might be that when you start your class next year, not only do you show your students how to get into Infinite Campus, because he said there was like that extra click,
Yeah.
remember? He should send out something to each parent, hey, if you want to check your child's score as this in a percentage score, which you're more familiar with, this is where you go through and give the steps of Infinite Campus to the parents.
It's really weird for me to think, like, I don't
And
remember my-
his
I
comment
remember
was,
my-
he thought it was a good idea, and he said, yeah, I look at it as a teacher, and I know what to do as a teacher, but I really don't know what to do as a parent,
It
to
does
go
look
through the
different.
process. So, anyway,
Screens look different, yeah.
so that just
That's a
might
great
be
suggestion.
a good thing to try.
For every class.
Well, with these
Well,
types of classes, so the
actually.
parents can see if their child's proficient, but at the same, or, you
What
know,
does proficient mean?
if they're advanced or whatever they are,
Why not?
but then be able to go to where, hey, if the final grade was today, he'd have a 73. Ooh, that's a C.
What percentage of the parents do you think are actively having to check in on their kids to make sure they're doing their work? I guess I don't remember mine having to harass me that much, but I'm
You
probably a bad
also
example.
didn't have an app attached to your pocket that will
Yeah.
provide a notification when you have late lunch, you missed a class, you didn't turn your flag for missing work, so you're getting real-time updates. So,
So now parents are just.
No, I just got the belt when I didn't get the A.
I get to find out if my daughter went pee how many times.
it is,
That's
okay, so
true.
that is similar
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
to the
Oh, yeah.
Care app, yep.
so parents can choose
Yeah,
what
there
they
was
want to get
high
notified by.
expectation
I
at the
can pull
Bardo House.
statistics on how many log into the portal or how many, I haven't looked at that regularly. I think I did once as a middle school principal, look at that to see like how many had the portal and were using it. But that is an area that there could be way better information, because you can make selections too of what you want to get notified for, see as a parent.
I've gone on my own child's campus with him, to just, well,
Yeah,
you
for
tell
him
me
to
it's
show,
not
yeah.
there, well, okay, show me, because I feel like it should be. You know, so a lot of it is on there.
Yeah.
Different ways.
That's a good suggestion. Just more communication about how the communication is able to be taken in.
So would that be a YouTube video or a Zoom meeting with the teacher for all the parents at once, or is that a?
Do a link on there, right? And a link seems easy to, and screen share so that it's recorded. And I can go back on, so then later if I'm like,
If you forget
what was that step again? Then I can just replay it. That's what,
How did we get anything done in the old days without being able to share a video or an email or a link?
communication, direct communication.
I know. Sounds exhausting.
Sent him home with the student and I
Never gonna- It's dog ate it.
pin it to the shirt.
The computer virus ate my homework.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.